And I was about to say welcome back to, but this is neither Hulu nor What If or any of my other videos that require an intro like that. You'd think I'd catch the Halloween movie on near Halloween, but what was I doing that week? Did I have plans? Or I don't know why I didn't catch it last week. I just didn't get around to it. But I did want to see Come Play because it did look creepy. It looked like a surprisingly, fresh type of movie. And I saw it. I came out of it. It's a good movie. Like it's not scary, although it does have one or two nice little jump scares to it. But it is this is a creepy film. Like they definitely put the ooze and the atmosphere in there right from the get when they introduced SpongeBob of all things, this most terrifying cartoon of all time. SpongeBob's a big thing for the kid who's autistic, and it's one of the things that shows he likes, so they play it a lot, and it's even used for communication purposes. But no, I mean this film's got a really good atmosphere. Basically, the story is, and if you've seen the trailer, you know exactly what the story is. Something basically is kind of attached itself to this kid in some way. He is trying to make friends. Larry just wants a friend. That's what Larry wants. And it uses like screens, electronics to try to communicate and kind of come into the world through some degree. And it's the parents trying to stop this creature from taking their son. All that. It's a really good film. It's got some logic gaps in it. I'll admit that. And they actually did kind of reveal if you've seen the trailer, they did reveal the end scene in the trailer somewhat. But that being said, it didn't really hinder the movie. The logic gaps aren't that big. And I'll give my take on what I think Larry actually was, because they don't actually explain what Larry is. They give you some allusions to what he might be, but they don't actually tell you what Larry is. So, like I said, story, creature latches onto his autistic kid who's lonely and, doesn't actually have any friends, and Larry wants to be your friend, but he's also, kind of dangerous. Right from the get, they do a good job of, I recognize the dad, and I even recognize the mom, but I don't know the actors' names right off the top of my head. I didn't recognize the kid, unfortunately, although I think I recognized the kid who played his friend. They do a really good job, I think, and I've known a couple autistic people in my life. Not at that age, mind you, but I met people with autistic kids, so I would say they captured a pretty realistic interpretation of not just the mannerism of someone with autism, like what they do for calming themselves down. I'll admit, I realize the thing he's doing, I occasionally do that too. I'm like, am I partially on the spectrum? Actually, they say a lot of us might be on some minute scale part of the spectrum anyway. But no, I felt they did a good job of capturing that. He obviously communicates with either a tablet or his phone or something. He hums SpongeBob, the SpongeBob song to calm himself down, or he spins in a circle, or he has texture issues. I felt they actually captured that pretty well, and they don't. He's a level of autistic who has real trouble with verbalization, and when spoilers, I'm gonna go into some spoilers in this movie or review. When they do show off him actually speaking, it isn't like he can just magically say, stop that! No, you don't get to know. He does finally say words, but it's not like he's forming complete sentences or anything like that. It's like, okay, these are the couple words that spur of the moment, adrenaline, fear for your life, are coming to him. So, yeah, I liked how they handled that. I also liked, surprisingly, how they handled the relationship between what we imagined the bullies were going to be, and it turns out they're not the bullies. Well, they were, but there's a reason for why they are the bullies. It turns out the kid that was bullying him used to actually be his best friend, and due to a circumstance where Oliver's the name of the kid, punched him. They basically didn't see each other, but it turns out that was orchestrated, unfortunately, by Oliver's mom, who just couldn't handle things. They really show the dynamic between two people what's the best way to put it? First off, the parents are great, although there are a couple line deliveries that are a little weird. The parents are really good, but I feel captured the two sides of the coin when dealing with a family structure like this. I don't know if they divorced. I don't think they did. I think the dad just went with somewhere else for a while. But it's clear they're at odds a lot because of the stress of raising an autistic child. But Dad's always seems to be the hero in Oliver's eyes, and to Mom's eyes, excuse me. Whereas Mom is the one who's dealing with it, but he's not really present for a lot of the strange stuff like speech therapy, dealing with him at home, all that stuff, where he's working most of the time. Whereas Mom is the one who actually has to deal with that, but because of that, she's constantly there, and she always has to, be the one who's regulating him. Oliver doesn't always see her in the best light. So it really causes strain, and you can really see how that plays out really well. I like that. The scene, like I said, it's not super scary, but there's a couple scenes where they get a good jump scare in, and there's one scene in particular near the end where I'm like, oh dear Lord. Like, oh dear. Like, I don't think that's how the kid wanted to see his mom. Oh God. I'll address that when we get to the end. But no, I think they handle the tension, that kind of sick feeling in your stomach you get a couple scenes, like, oh God, oh God, oh God. I felt like they handled that really well. I will say for the logic gaps though, first off, the mom picked up on it really quick. Now, to be fair, when you see the tablet that you're communicating with this thing moving around, you don't actually see it, but you turn and it's somewhere else, and you're like, you're the only one there. Okay, that's one thing. But then all the light bulbs you immediately bought are taken out of the packaging and immediately put into their socket. I'm like, oh, well, admittedly, you might jump to a supernatural gap. Or you might jump the logic gap into the supernatural. I can see where she goes with that, but she accepted that really quick. And it isn't until Larry attacks Oliver at the dad's, I can't remember what he's doing. I remember what he's doing, I just don't know the name of it. Like, parking meter kind of guy. Basically, he's just sitting in a parking lot, and he's basically like the valet kind of guy. He sits in a booth and stuff like that for his job at night. So when Larry gets in and attacks him, he's just like, okay, yeah, all right. Oh man! But here's the thing: Larry's main way of getting through into the real world is through the screens. And he says, once you finish my story, I can come through and all that stuff. You got to finish the story and all that. It's like, why don't know? Like at one point because Larry's can move through electronics. He's appearing in the tablet, and the dad starts reading through the tablet. I'm like, maybe don't read it. The more you read it, the more power and more into our world he gets. So maybe stop doing that. And they try to destroy the screens, and that doesn't work. I'll admit that was one of the few effects that was a little iffy, where we kind of see Larry coming through the screens. I'm like, I get it, but yeah, that's maybe not the best of the effects we see in here. The effects on Larry though are actually really good for what it's worth. So yeah, I would say that was probably the only iffy effect. I thought the effects overall though on Larry were pretty good. But yeah, I'm like, there's a couple like leaps in logic, and then like don't read the story. Now eventually Larry shows up on a TV and just starts going through the story himself. So it's one of those things where it's like, okay, he could control if he wanted to, but when you're by yourself with just one screen and it's a tablet, all you gotta do is flip it face down and don't read the story. So with Larry and dealing with the end of the movie, which I actually felt was like a really nice ending. I was waiting for like a jump scare to pop out though on that ending. I'm like, okay, where's Larry? So Larry, first off, Larry is very cool looking. Like, he's not the most original, but they try to make it at least unique in some way. He's very skeletal, very gaunt, very thin and skinny and pale and horrifying looking. I've heard someone kind of describe him a little bit like a design kind of like the Cloverfield monster a little bit, and to some degree. But when you actually look at Larry throughout the story, or the movie, he's dangerous, he's scary, but he is actually just, like, as the story says, he is just someone who wants a friend. The little we get on his backstory is that people are lonely, and that he was created through that loneliness. I often talk anytime I do a Who Would Win that involves Slender Man or characters similar to Slender Man. One of the prevailing theories in Slender Man is that Slenderman is a being born of the collective belief in Slenderman. Enough people believed in him that it actually willed Slenderman into existence. And from the way Larry kind of described it, he might be an entity similar to that. A being that was basically born from so much created from so much loneliness in the world that they actually gave him some sort of physical being. But the problem with that is Larry exists in a different world. It's parallel to our world, and he can kind of come through sometimes, but not very often, and through very extenuating means. So I don't quite buy the idea that he is a being born of this, but he just exists in another world. What I actually like the idea of is that the stories, it's actually kind of like the Babadook a little bit. As far as I know, Babadook's awesome. This was just really good. The story kind of is like Larry doesn't get to play pretend. He just wants a friend. All that. When I heard that line and read it on the book, the realization kind of clicked to me, because there's a point where you see Larry try to beckon him Oliver under the bed. I'm like, well, is he like a boogeyman? But I'm thinking, what if, and hear me out here, what if Larry is an imaginary friend? But he's an imaginary friend because, and they say people made fun of him because he was ugly and all that. What if he's like an imaginary friend that never got a friend? What if he's just something like the world he lives in is where like the imaginary friends kind of come from, exist, or born, and maybe he's the only one there, like because he's the only imaginary friend who no one wanted to be a friend with because he's so ugly and unkept and all that. And I think on that, it's like that kind of works. I mean, yes, he's clearly a supernatural being of some kind. He uses the electricity, but I like that idea of the kind of play on what happens when the imaginary friend doesn't get a friend. What happens when the imaginary friend, so much loneliness and imagination causes this imaginary friend to exist, but no one wants to be this imaginary friend's friend because of just how uncomfortable he is to look at and to be around, stuff like that. And even as the movie goes, Larry is both sympathetic and horrifying all at once. Like the sounds he makes are creepy, but at the same time you can make an argument that it's just like a kid crying, basically. Like a lot of times, like sometimes you see him in the corner crying, like he's clear, or just like kind of sobbing, like he doesn't have a friend, like no one wants to be his friend. And when and by the end of the film too, he takes Oliver, but Oliver, the whole point of the story even says, you got to take my hand. I can't take you with me unless you take my hand. You got to accept me as your friend. And ultimately, like, even though he was very harsh and even though he, attacked people he cared about, he ultimately just wanted a friend. And spoilers now, like 13 minutes. Okay. So just finishing it up here real quick before I go into how the movie ends. I'll give you the 5 count, but ultimately I really like the movie. I think it's actually, I wish I had seen this on Halloween. It was a great Halloween movie. So, all right. That's my thoughts on the movie, but here's the spoilers for the end. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. If you stayed past that, spoilers. So ultimately, to save her son, the mother takes his hand and becomes his new friend. And right before this, he actually looks her in the eye, which is something that I know a lot of autistic people have trouble with. That being said, as he takes her, and I didn't think we know that when he takes them, they actually start to transform too into something akin to him. But I didn't think that was going to happen until he pulled her into the world. Instead, we see her transforming right in front of her son. I'm like, oh dear God! Wow! Oh God! Well, that great image to leave your kid on. But then we get to cut back to where he's in speech therapy and he's actually verbalizing. He's actually saying words, doing better. And we see the father, who Larry had put into a temporary coma for a while and still is walking around on a cane, is now basically the primary caretaker. He's the parent and he's got to do all the stuff that she did. And ultimately, it ends with the lights flickering off. Oliver sees the lights flickering and we're led to believe, is it Larry or is it his mom? And I'm at that point, I'm like, okay, it's his mom. His mom clearly is I was expecting Larry to be there too. Like Larry and her just standing there playing with Oliver. And I think that would have actually been pretty cool, all things considered. Or, Oliver jump scares us at the end, just like, rah! Or not Oliver, I keep saying that. Larry just jump scares us at the end. I thought that would have been cool to see Larry there playing too. Like, Larry's really not a bad guy after you get through the whole near manslaughter or near murder of your loved ones. But no, you see, and this is the scene they have in the trailer where Oliver's spinning in midair. And I was waiting that entire movie for that scene, because I remember that scene, like, I thought he was going to be more inclined to be Oliver, Larry's friend. And that's why, Larry's playing with him at one point and stuff like that. But no, when we didn't get to that and I realized where we were going, like, he's playing with his mom. And sure enough, the dad brings up the phone and he's scared because he thinks it's Larry, but then he sees it and he sees that his mom's there and he's, starts to cry. It's like, she's there. And it also kind of gives you the idea that they can interact with her again, and she's not dead. She gets turned into something else. And they do show that too. Like, she's not, they don't show her face because we don't know what her face clearly looks like at this point. We saw what it was kind of turning into, but we don't know what it clearly looks like ultimately now. But you see that her dress is like black and kind of ragged. Her hair's kind of wavy, almost like it's in the water. Her skin's on the gray side. So she's clearly transformed into whatever Larry is to some degree. However, my guess is she's nowhere near as... she's clearly not as in bad a shape as Larry is. Maybe we see Larry, turns out he's Slender Man in the suit and tie. He's like, this is my wife now. Unlikely. Larry just wants a friend. And they do a great job too about, I was wondering if we would see her face, and I probably was gonna laugh at that, like, oh god, he's like, Oliver's just smiling, she's just, it's like, that would have been hilarious. But no, they actually did the smart thing and not showed her face. They show her from her perspective, her looking at Oliver and saying, I'm always gonna protect you, I'm always gonna keep you safe and all that. And I'm like, that's a really good sentiment. Like, that's a nice way to end it, I felt. Like, I still would have liked to see Larry pop up one last time. She's like, rah! Or again, I think again, would have been really cool for her and Larry to have been playing with him, and, the father being like, first seeing Larry and then be like, no, and then seeing the mom like, what? And then they kind of give they both kind of look at him, and she kind of keeps